Hello and welcome back to Marvelous Videos. Batman, the animated series, was more than just a show for us. It was a childhood obsession. I still remember how, even during exam season, it was the only show I was allowed to watch. Probably because if I didn't, I'd throw such a fit that the exam itself would go badly. Now that I've grown up, my love and respect for the series hasn't faded, it's only grown deeper as I've uncovered how much creativity and innovation went into making it. Today, we're sharing 30 insane facts about this groundbreaking animated show that just might make you love it even more. Let's get to it. Before we get too deep into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Now this is what
Which actor originally voiced the Joker and recorded multiple episodes before being replaced? Before Mark Hamill's now legendary take on the Joker, the role was originally given to none other than Tim Curry. Known for his iconic and unsettling performances in the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Stephen King's It, Curry was an inspired choice for a darker, more sinister Joker that matched the noir tone of Batman the Animated Series. He reportedly recorded 4 full episodes as the Clown Prince of Crime. Unfortunately, Curry suffered a bout of bronchitis, which affected his voice during production. However, some claim the actual reason was his performance, which was apparently too scary for a younger target audience. However, Curry himself confirmed that illness was the real reason he had to step away. Clips of his performance have since surfaced online, and while brief, they offer a glimpse into what might have been a Joker with a deep, demonic rasp that felt more monstrous than manic. While Hamill's Joker would go on to define the role for generations of fans, appearing across the DCAU and even in the Arkham video games. Still, many fans believe Curry's version could have been just as legendary in a more horror-leaning adaptation. It's one of those fascinating what-ifs in animation history. How do you think Tim Curry would have done as the Joker? Let us know in the comments section down below. Which villain was invented for the show and later made canon in the comics? Before she was headlining movies or leading her own animated series, Harley Quinn didn't even exist in the DC Comics universe. She was born in 1992, not in a comic book, but in the episode Joker's Favor from Batman the Animated Series. Voiced by Arlene Sorkin, who also inspired the character, Harley was originally created by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm as a one-off sidekick for the Joker, but her mix of chaotic charm and clownish violence instantly clicked with audiences. At the time, the idea of the Joker having a girlfriend was a controversial one. Longtime Batman editor Denny O'Neil reportedly disliked the concept, saying it made the Joker seem too human. But Harley's popularity couldn't be denied. She reappeared in more episodes, and her full origin as psychiatrist Dr. Harleen Quinzel was explored in the episode Mad Love, where her backstory was flipped when she's revealed as the Joker's former psychiatrist in Arkham Asylum, who was driven mad by her obsession with the Clown Prince. Eventually, DC gave in and officially introduced her into comic book continuity in 1999's Batman Harley Quinn one-shot. Now, with a little bit of thanks to Margot Robbie, Harley Quinn is everywhere. She's evolved from being the Joker's sidekick to one of DC's most complex and marketable characters. It's wild to think that one of the most iconic characters in modern pop culture wasn't even part of Batman's world until a cartoon changed everything. Harley wasn't even the only character who was first introduced in the show and then later appeared in comics. Yeah, Officer Renee Montoya, who would eventually go on to become the Question, is also a member of the club.
I figured out how to manage this thing pretty good.
Who provided the unforgettable voice of Clayface in a 2-part arc? When Batman the Animated Series introduced Clayface, specifically Matt Hagen, in the powerful 2-part episode called Feet of Clay, it was none other than Ron Perlman who brought the tragic villain to life. Perlman, who was known earlier for his breakout role in Beauty and the Beast, lent his gravelly, emotional vocal energy to the character across multiple episodes, not just the debut arc, but also in the new Batman Adventures, occasionally reprising Hagen's heartfelt desperation. In Feet of Clay, Perlman plays Hagen as a once successful actor who, after a disfiguring car accident, becomes addicted to an experimental chemical and slowly loses himself to the rising tide of his own body horror. Perlman's performance captures the physical transformation and the psychological depth with the faintest hope of redemption perfectly. His work was so effective that recently, filmmaker Mike Flanagan cited these episodes as the direct inspiration for his own Clayface script for DC Studios' upcoming live-action adaptation. Perlman's Clayface remains a standout. The role marked an early highlight in his voice acting career and set an industry benchmark for how animated tragedy can still leave a lasting impact. The fact that the world of DC film is now reaching back to these episodes for inspiration says more than praise ever could. Which character's comic book origin was fully rewritten by the series? Before Batman the Animated Series, Mr. Freeze was just a gimmicky minor villain who responded to the name of Mr. Zero. The character debuted in Batman issue 121 back in 1959, where he's depicted armed with a freeze gun and gets caught and cured in the same issue, then promptly forgotten. Enter 1992's Batman the Animated Series episode Heart of Ice, penned by Paul Dini. The episode reinvented him as Dr. Victor Fries, a brilliant cryogenics scientist attempting to save his terminally ill wife, Nora, by keeping her frozen in suspended animation. Betrayed by his boss, Ferris Boyle, and struck by chemicals during an industrial accident, Freeze transforms into the tragic anti-hero Mr. Freeze, driven by grief and rage rather than superficial villainy. This origin story struck a chord with fans and critics alike, earning the episode critical acclaim and even an Emmy. DC Comics couldn't ignore it, as later comic book adaptations adopted Freeze's revised origin, and it informed his portrayal in films like 1997's Batman and Robin and the Arkham video game series. Yes, Batman and Robin is the movie where the Batsuit had nipples. Anyways, Mr. Freeze only appears a handful of times in the DC AU, but he emerges as one of the franchise's most emotionally resonant villains. It's the perfect example of how the show elevated Silver Age leftovers into dark modern characters, solid proof that animated TV can define comic legend just as powerfully as the comics themselves.
This is a personal vendetta. It doesn't concern you.
Which iconic episode almost didn't air because it was too depressing? Well, believe it or not, we're stuck on the same Emmy-winning episode, Heart of Ice. Why? Well, Fox Kids executives were hesitant because the episode was deemed too dark and emotionally heavy for a children's show. You know, it wasn't just another villain of the week plot. For an animated series airing on weekday afternoons, this was pushing the emotional boundaries hard. But Paul Dini and Bruce Timm stood by the script, and the risk paid off. The episode aired, received critical acclaim, and went on to win a Daytime Emmy for outstanding writing. In hindsight, it's wild to think that the show's most celebrated episode, the one that raised the bar for storytelling and superhero animation, almost didn't make it out of the vault. Which villain was inspired by tabloid stories of child star meltdowns? That would be Baby Doll, an original villain specifically developed for Batman the Animated Series by Paul Dini. The inspiration behind this particular character came heavily from actual tabloid newsheads and the sad story arcs of former child stars, such as Gary Coleman and Emmanuel Lewis, stars who had trouble growing up either through stunted physical development or the refusal of the public to view them as anything beyond their TV characters. In the episode titled Baby Doll, Mary Louise Dahl is presented as a one-season sitcom cutie whose condition, technically defined in-universe as systemic hypoplasia, made her look like she was always 5. After her own show was cancelled and a try at serious acting didn't work, Dahl's life unraveled. Shunned by Hollywood, stuck in a child's body but with a grown-up sorrow, she became a criminal, trying to restitch together her former sitcom family with kidnapping first and eventually violence. Baby Doll has rarely ventured beyond animation. The only time she was seen in comics was Batman White Knight issue 2 in 2017, sitting beside Killer Croc in a reference to the new Batman Adventures episode Love is a Croc. We hope to see more of her in the future. What forced the redesign of Catwoman for the new Batman Adventures? As Batman the Animated Series morphed into the new Batman Adventures, almost all of the characters underwent a redesign, but Catwoman's makeover was probably the most extreme and contentious. Her initial appearance was based largely on Michelle Pfeiffer's in Tim Burton's Batman Returns. Gray catsuit, flowing blonde hair, and traditional black cowl. But when the show relocated to a new network, the animation style was updated industry-wide to be more streamlined and reductionist. Catwoman's new appearance became a black bodysuit, short jet black hair, ghost white complexion, and more angular green eyes. The objective wasn't style for its own sake. The redesign was part of an overall change in tone and philosophy of animation. The producers wished for a less complex and comic book-like aesthetic which would entail cleaner lines, more solid shapes, and simpler animation turnaround. This was particularly significant to the budget and faster pacing of the WB's programming lineup. But not everyone was a fan. Some enthusiasts felt the redesign eliminated the richness and sensual beauty of her original look, while others liked the edgier noir-influenced look. Either way, this choice was an intentional creative turn that helped establish the new Batman Adventures as its own time period. What did you think of the redesign? We'd love to hear your thoughts down below.
Harvey, what happened?
What gangster film inspired Two-Face's split identity scenes? The sensational on-screen portrayal of Harvey Dent's descent into madness in Batman the Animated Series wasn't borrowed from comics, but was heavily inspired by gangster movies, especially Scarface, directed by Brian De Palma. Writers and creators have cited the movie's intense focus on psychological breakdown and dualities as a primary source of inspiration. Just like Tony Montana, Harvey Dent becomes consumed by power and internal struggle, transforming into a person he no longer recognizes. In the two-part episode titled Two-Face, you can sense Scarface's DNA in the composition, the tension, and particularly in the classic image of Two-Face fighting with his reflection, an homage to the double psyche and internal struggle for power, which is the theme of most noir and gangster classics. But it wasn't Scarface alone. The whole noir genre came into play in shaping the tone of Batman the Animated Series. Dent's descent is handled as if it were a character study within a crime epic, complete with brooding lighting and psychological tension instead of comic book melodrama. The series' take imbued Two-Face with depth and seriousness that was mostly unheard of for cartoon villains at the time. Which famous actors were almost roped in for voice acting? Batman the Animated Series boasted a voice cast of powerhouses, but if things had gone differently, it could have easily featured some very different actors. Hard to believe, but showrunners did in fact make offers to some major Hollywood stars for some of the roles. First off, Al Pacino. He was solicited to provide Harvey Dent's voice. It's difficult to imagine Tony Montana himself tossing a coin during the middle of an interrogation, but that's what was proposed before the job landed with Richard Moll, whose gruff, shaking voice became legendary. It doesn't end there. Patrick Stewart and Anthony Hopkins were both said to have been in the running for Mr. Freeze before the part went to Michael Ansara. Considering what we know today, Ansara's icy, despair-tinged delivery in Heart of Ice, it's difficult to imagine anyone else delivering that sort of unspoken heartbreak in the role. Still, considering Hopkins mumbling, "My wife, my love," or Stewart going full-on Shakespearean with freeze puns is kinda tempting, isn't it? But here's another big surprise. Sir Christopher Lee was also up for consideration as Ra's al Ghul. That would have made sense, although David Warner excelled in the role with subtle menace and aristocratic refinement. Lee's authoritative gravitas would have been a more unsettling alternative. According to voice director Andrea Romano, it was certainly a name on the list. Ultimately, although the show landed the plane with the talent it did hire, it's crazy to imagine what could have been with a few all-time greats on that cast list. We'd love to hear your celebrity fan cast for Batman the Animated Series in the comments down below. Why did the creators paint Gotham on black paper? Batman the Animated Series wasn't just dark in theme, it literally used dark colors in its design. The creative team, headed by Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, sought to make Gotham City an even more brooding, living presence. To achieve this, they drew inspiration from two sources: Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie and the classic Fleischer Superman cartoons of the 1930s, particularly for the city at night look. But the true masterstroke belonged to Radomski himself. To differentiate the backgrounds of the show from the bland, multicolored backgrounds of other cartoons, he proposed something radical: paint most of the backgrounds on black paper rather than white. This unorthodox methodology created a world that seemed shadowed and ageless. It provided Gotham with a somber atmosphere in the form of bright neon lighting, dark shadows, and heroic silhouettes. The choice served to establish the show's defining Dark Deco look and provided Batman's universe with a distinct cinematic quality that has seldom been equaled in animation. So, as you can see, this decision wasn't just an aesthetic preference, it was the basis for the entire visual design of the show. Without it, Gotham wouldn't have seemed nearly as vital or terrorized. What animation studio was responsible for some of the show's most visually stunning episodes? Tokyo Movie Shinsha, the classic Japanese animation studio, delivered some of the loveliest, emotionally powerful episodes of Batman the Animated Series. Famous for their top-of-the-line work, TMS produced episodes of such richness and cinematic vocabulary that they readily transcended what was typical of American TV animation during the early 90s. TMS's animation isn't difficult to track down. Anyone familiar with their work will instantly recognize the silky smooth frame transitions, kinetic action choreography, jazzy shadows, creative usage of perspective, and film noir-inspired lighting effects. They went whole hog with the show's dark deco aesthetic, transforming Gotham City into a drippy, obsessive metropolis that became a character in its own right. Some of the most iconic episodes were handled by TMS, including Heart of Ice, praised for its haunting graphics and suggestive atmosphere consistent with the episode's tragic mood, Robin's Reckoning, Part 1, which won an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program, and last but not least, Beat of Clay, Parts 1 and 2, this one featuring innovative morphing animation for the transformation sequences of Clayface, which were groundbreaking. TMS was usually used when emotional storytelling or action sequences would be highlighted in an episode. Their work added gravitas and refinement, enabling the show to break the cycle of kids' superhero TV. Decades later, audiences and animators alike still refer to TMS's work as a benchmark for which all other animated television must strive. How did the show's use of music break new ground for animated television? Batman the Animated Series not only changed the way superhero stories were presented, it even raised the bar for what music in an animated show could be. Instead of relying on generic cues or looping synth motifs that most cartoons of the period used routinely, the series featured fully scored original theme music for nearly every installment. Such ambition was virtually unheard of for a weekday animated series. At the center of this musical transformation was Shirley Walker, the first female lead composer for a large superhero project. She hired live players, often utilizing a small orchestra, and composed individual themes for individual shows and characters. Batman had a theme, Joker had a theme, Harley Quinn had a theme, and so forth, giving the show a richness of music more in line with a Hollywood film than Saturday morning TV. Even more unexpectedly, the show didn't struggle with silence when silence was needed. Instead of filling every second available with background talking, it allowed tension and emotion to simmer and gave the score room to breathe. It was riskily understated and incredibly well executed, especially in quieter, more psychological episodes like Heart of Ice or I Am the Night. This style set a new benchmark, and the show proved that music for animation was as subtle and effective as any live-action theme. Walker's contribution elevated the series, but it also opened the door to an entire generation of animation shows that succeeded it. What was the impact of the Batmobile design? The Batmobile depicted in the show became a hugely influential factor for all future Batman storytellers. Bruce Timm and Shane Poindexter came up with the design, combining 1930s Art Deco and high-tech imagery to result in a jet-black beast that looked at home in either pulp noir or a science fiction epic. Its unimaginably stretched length, glowing turbine exhaust, and low center of gravity gave it the appearance of something not quite a car, but rather a war chariot. One glimpse of the Batmobile, and you'd know it belonged to the Dark Knight. But what truly cements this Batmobile's legacy is how influential it became. From the Arkham video games to later animated shows and even modern comics, its design DNA can be seen everywhere. You'll notice echoes of it in everything, from Batman Beyond to Pattinson's Batman, where that blend of raw muscle and stylized menace still lingers. In short, this wasn't just a vehicle, it was a statement, and it continues to drive the Batmobile's evolution to this day. Yes, that pun was intended, and yes, I did love using it. What was unique about the episode Almost Got Him? Almost Got Him flips the script literal. Instead of the usual Batman-focused episode, this one puts the spotlight on the villains. Joker, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, Penguin, and Killer Croc all sit down at a poker table and exchange stories about the times they came closest to besting the Dark Knight. Each is a little mini flashback unto itself, giving us a taste of villain personalities and plans foiled in film noir-infected anthology format. What's clever about this episode isn't just the format, it's also the surprise, which we won't spoil for those of you who haven't seen it. Almost Got Him is an exercise in storytelling parsimony. It's amusing, engaging, and intelligent, all in just 22 minutes. Few superhero cartoons dared to be this experimental, and few have succeeded as well. Go back and check it out if you haven't seen it already. You're gonna have some fun. How did the show handle gunshot noises differently from other kids' shows? Whereas the majority of 90s cartoons replaced gunshot noises with laser beams or cartoon sound effects, Batman, the animated series, did the reverse. It used actual gun noises, not exaggerated sci-fi hand cannons, but old-school firearms that appeared and sounded menacing. And why not? I mean, the mobsters wielded revolvers, thugs used Tommy guns, the gunfire had substance, sounding as though it belonged in a film noir crime drama, not a Saturday morning cartoon. This choice gave Gotham a realistic feel and increased the stakes, but the show never blurred that line into exploitative violence. Even when Commissioner Gordon was shot, one of the few moments that any character ever got shot, it was restrained. The realism didn't have anything to do with having shock value and had everything to do with being realistic in the world that Batman lived in. That's it. By being courageous enough to deal with its children's audience with maturity, Batman the Animated Series set the standard for cartoon storytelling without any funny laser sound effects. What made the show's credits so unusual? Unlike the majority of the animated shows of that period, Batman the Animated Series provided outstanding credibility to its writers and directors, with their titles given to each episode separately. Instead of burying names in end credits or a generic list, the show opened each episode with a dramatic intertitle card that prominently featured the title of the episode, the writer, and the director. The cards were individually tailored to the tone, mood, or theme of the episode, usually using bold imagery, stylized lettering, and minimalist graphics. Handcrafted primarily by co-producer Eric Radomski, the cards felt and looked more like something out of a vintage noir movie than a Saturday morning cartoon. By placing the names of the creative staff at the forefront, the show acknowledged that every episode had its own voice, its own environment, and its own array of storytellers. By taking this step, both kids and adults received a respectful reminder that they were seeing something built with real craftsmanship. It helps set the show apart not just as a cartoon, but as a good storytelling product that should be respected. Which character's voice actor improvised lines that became iconic catchphrases? No points for guessing that we're talking about none other than Mark Hamill's Joker here. While Kevin Conroy gave us the iconic, "I am vengeance, I am the night" line, it was Hamill's improvised madness that helped make Batman the Animated Series Joker one of the most definitive versions of the character. Did you know his signature maniacal laugh was not even mentioned in the script? Yup, it was Hamill's own creation. It was so chilling and unpredictable that it practically became a character in and of itself. Directors often gave Hamill room to experiment during recording, and he ran wild with it. He'd slip in twisted ad-libs, throw in extra laughs mid-line, or shift tones on a whim, giving the Joker a sense of unstable brilliance that couldn't be captured on paper. Some of these ad-libbed moments became fan favorites and were even brought back in future episodes. Hamill's take on the Clown Prince of Crime proved that voice acting could elevate a character far beyond what's written on the page. His improvised delivery brought chaos and menace in perfect harmony and has since set the gold standard for all Jokers that follow. How did the creators pitch the show without a full pilot? Before Batman the Animated Series even had a single complete episode, Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski created a 1-minute animated pitch movie called The Dark Knight's First Night. I know, the title sounds like a B-movie or worse, but it was actually a short, silent vignette starring Batman in action. You get the basics, like him emerging out of the shadows, battling rooftop goons, and fading into the night. No exposition, no dialogue, just raw atmosphere, movement, and tone. They felt that they needed to capture and showcase the mood of the show, the black and white lighting, the suspense, and the stylized dark deco aesthetic. Timm and Radomski even recorded the rough voices themselves, adding grunts and sound effects to gain an added punch. Although Warner Bros. Had already signed off on proceeding with an animated Batman series, this proof of concept was so popular that it cemented the creators' permanent positions and set the tone and visual direction for the show, which is now regarded as a classic. The mini pilot remains a fantastic testament to how mood and style can sell a concept even without a completed script and voice cast. Unfortunately, this isn't available anywhere for us to see, but the beloved intro of the show is very similar to it, with some even calling it a short remake. Why did Robin's age keep changing across the show? Robin's age in Batman the Animated Series and the New Batman Adventures varied primarily due to creative and real-world concerns. Dick Grayson, in the initial series, was depicted as a young adult. He was around 18 or so and in college. This enabled him to fight crime alongside Batman more credibly and sidestepped the child endangerment controversy. It also allowed for more mature character development and independent storylines, like the estrangement that ultimately led to him becoming Nightwing. When the the series transitioned to the new Batman adventures, the showrunners introduced Tim Drake as the new Robin. This Robin was much younger, around 13 years old, in accordance with his comic book origins and more youth-oriented appeal for younger viewers. His origin story on the show was also altered, incorporating aspects of Jason Todd's harder-edged, streetwise persona to account for how a child of this young age could convincingly function in the tough environment of Gotham. So Robin's age wasn't random. The characters were distinct and they evolved in tandem with the tone, audience, and storytelling demands of the series, yielding two very different yet iconic visions of the Boy Wonder. Which is your favorite? Which Planet of the Apes star voiced the Mad Hatter? Roddy McDowall, the legendary actor who portrayed Cornelius and Caesar in the Planet of the Apes franchise, did voice work for Jervis Tetch, aka the Mad Hatter, on Batman the Animated Series. McDowall brought a subtle mix of whimsy and obsession to the role. His Wonderland-obsessed villain was creepy and strangely likable, getting to the warped essence of a man enthralled by fantasy and rejected by love. The performance stood out for its melodramatic sensationalism, making what could have been a campy gimmick character into one of the show's better psychologically complex rogues. It's an amazing illustration of the fact that Batman the Animated Series didn't just hire voice actors, they hired some real talent with some serious acting chops to bring Gotham's wackiest minds to life. Has Batman ever used a gun in the animated series? We Batman fans know very well that Batman's no-guns policy is inviolable in most versions, and Batman the Animated Series is no different. However, there is one instance in the episode titled The Forgotten. In this episode, Bruce Wayne suffers from a loss of memory and is sent to a labor camp. When the time comes for his escape, he picks up a firearm and points it at a guard to distract him. Fortunately, he doesn't pull the trigger and drops the weapon shortly after. The scene is brief yet significant because it's the sole instance throughout the entire series where Batman so much picks up a gun with purpose, albeit briefly. This scene is always quoted by fans and showcased in discussion forums and video clips because of its rarity. Though technically it displays Batman almost using a gun, it doesn't go against the intentions of the character. The producers of the show had rigid in-house regulations against Batman employing guns, consistent with the censorship norms of the time and the essence of Batman's philosophy. For the remainder of the series, Batman is always depicted disarming foes, never firing guns himself. So it's safe to say that we should forget about this instance from The Forgotten. Okay, that one I feel a little bad about. I'm sorry, no more bad jokes, I promise. Which villain was created just for the show, inspired by old radio serials? The episode you're looking for here is called Beware the Grey Ghost. It features Ted Dimer, aka the Mad Bomber, a villain created exclusively for Batman the Animated Series. Dimer becomes obsessed with a vintage television serial hero called the Grey Ghost, evoking nostalgia-laden figures from the 1940s and 50s adventure series and radio shows like The Shadow or The Lone Ranger. Let's talk about his modus operandi. Instead of hand-delivering bombs, the Mad Bomber used remote-controlled toy cars rigged with explosives and reenacted his favorite plot points from the Grey Ghost television series. This makes him a one-of-a-kind lunatic villain driven by pop culture geekdom instead of comic book inspiration. There but for the grace of God goes I. Anyways, the episode doubles back on meta-influence by having Adam West play Simon Trent, the actor who played the Grey Ghost on TV. Batman takes the help of the actor and his personal hero to stop the Mad Bomber. Beware the Grey Ghost is notable for its emotional impact and originality. With its nod to nostalgia and a villain created from TV addiction, it's a unique story influenced by actual world input and not comic book heritage. Which episode featured a duplicate Batman? The episode titled His Silicon Soul introduces a robotic duplicate of Batman crafted using Advanced HARDAC, which stands for Holographic Applied Robotics Defense Automated Control. It was a technology originally developed by Dr. Carl Rossum. In this episode, the android wears Batman's suit, mimics his fighting style, and even believes it is Batman, complete with implanted memories and skills and that iconic voice. As a result, the ultimate showdown becomes more than just a fight, it becomes a psychological battle. The android grew increasingly more human, sparking a crisis of identity, and for Bruce, it became an existential crisis. Inspired by sci-fi classics like The Terminator, this episode dives deep into themes of artificial intelligence and personal identity. In the end, the real Batman wins not by brute force, but by outsmarting the duplicate, showing that humanity can't be replicated even by perfect hardware. Which episode featured a real US Senator as a guest voice? The 13th episode of Season 2, which was titled Showdown, featured real-life U.S. Senator Patrick Leahy lending his voice to the role of the territorial governor, marking one of the rare occasions where an active politician crossed over into the world of animation, especially one as stylized and gritty as Gotham. A lifelong Batman fan, Leahy voiced the character during a ceremonial scene set in the Old West where Ra's al Ghul and Arcady Duvall disrupt the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. While his role was brief, it was historic. The cameo wasn't a one-time thing either. Leahy has appeared in 5 live-action Batman films from 3 separate generations, including Batman Forever, The Dark Knight, and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. But Showdown remains his only appearance in Batman the Animated Series, a cool Easter egg for fans of both politics and Gotham's rich lore. Will he end up appearing in Robert Pattinson's Batman 2? We guess only time will tell. How did Space Ghost inspire Batman the Animated Series? Believe it or not, the biggest single influence on Batman the Animated Series was Space Ghost, the stylish 1960s Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Co-creator Bruce Timm freely acknowledges Alex Toth, the great designer of Space Ghost, as the inspiration for the clean, graphic look of his Batman universe. Toth's distinctive style, with its clean lines, dramatic silhouettes, and hard contrast, was the basis for the show's Dark Deco look. Like Space Ghost, Batman the Animated Series embraced mood-suggestive lighting, heavy shadows, and emotive shapes to provide a somber, cinematic atmosphere. Toth's impact did not remain limited to design. His visual storytelling style resounds throughout Batman the Animated Series. Even Space Ghost's tech-based hero persona set the stage for Timm's take on Batman: cool, collected, and high-tech. The DNA of Space Ghost permeates deep within Gotham. Without Alex Toth's ageless designs and narrative sense, Batman the Animated Series could have appeared and felt totally different. Now, wouldn't that sting? The 2 most important characters never speak to each other. Here's an interesting fact. Even though they're 2 of the most significant characters in Batman's life, Commissioner Gordon and Alfred Pennyworth never share a single word of dialogue in Batman the Animated Series. Gordon is Batman's reliable second within the GCPD, and Alfred is the indispensable butler and emotional center at Wayne Manor. Both recur frequently in the series and are important parts of Batman's double life. Even when they appear together in the same episodes, such as during citywide emergencies or when Bruce gets hurt, they never exchange a word between them. Not a single one. This was probably no accident. Rather, it's a testament to the show's sly plot construction. Gordon embodies Batman's outer self as Gotham's guardian, whereas Alfred embodies his inner life as Bruce Wayne's conscience. Separating them serves to reinforce Batman's compartmentalized life. It's a subtle detail, but an indicative one when it comes to the intention behind the series' structure. All the voice actors recorded their voice together. One of the best aspects of Batman the Animated Series is its phenomenal voice acting, and the reason why is pretty obvious. Unlike typical cartoons from the era, where actors would record their dialogue individually in isolated booths, Batman the Animated Series had its cast record as a group. This meant that Kevin Conroy as Batman, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as Alfred, and Bob Hastings as Commissioner Gordon would all be in the same room responding to one another's performances live. This live stage-type performance generated natural rhythm, timing, and chemistry that most animated series could only dream of. Dialogue was more naturally delivered, emotional hits hit harder, and even punchlines felt crisper, all because the actors were drawing off each other in the instant. There was only one exception to the seated mic rule, and right you are, it's Mark Hamill. To truly tap into the anarchic energy of the Joker, Hamill was permitted to stand and physically act, employing gestures, facial movements, and motion to capture the character of the twisted Joker. That physicality informed one of the most iconic iterations of the Joker ever committed to screen. This group recording technique wasn't merely a technical decision, it was an artistic one that elevated the series to a level of emotional and vocal sophistication not typically encountered in animation even today. Why did Robin suddenly become essential to every episode? Throughout its initial run, Batman the Animated Series was under growing pressure from the Fox network to make the show more directly appealing to children. Fox felt that children would benefit from seeing characters around their own age appear on screen, so they pushed relentlessly for Robin to become a more prominent character. Initially appearing periodically, Robin was promoted to co-lead fairly quickly. Fox went so far as to rename the show The Adventures of Batman and Robin and imposed a strict edict. No episode could be greenlit unless Robin was prominently featured in the plot. This change upset some of the writers for the show, who believed the creative freedom and darker tone were being lost. But The team adjusted. The role of Robin grew to accommodate richer emotional trajectories, more mentorship and character growth stories, and a greater appeal for a younger audience. Although the mandate was the result of a network marketing choice, it ultimately made Robin a richer and more lasting character within the show, showing us that sometimes forced alterations can actually enrich a narrative. How Batman Returns shaped the look and feel of the animated series. When Batman the Animated Series premiered in 1992, it did so only 3 months after Batman Returns opened in theaters, and the cultural impact of the Tim Burton film was felt immediately. From design to music, the show borrowed a few stylistic elements from the movie to achieve a unified brand synergy between the two pieces of media. Most significantly, the Penguin's look in the animated show was closely based on Danny DeVito's grotesque rendition of Batman Returns, down to the flipper-like hands, hunched stance, and even his duck-shaped car. Warner Bros. Animation pushed for the match for branding reasons, so much so that Bruce Timm had to draw designs based on what he could directly see on the set of the film, as official reference photos were forbidden. The effect spilled over into the characters. Gotham City's design in the series echoed the movie's retro-future look, a dark noir mix of 1940s style, Art Deco architecture, and futuristic technology. Danny Elfman's ominous theme music also made the transition as the series' opening theme, echoing the Burtonian feel. Even minor details, such as the Joker being named Jack Napier, tips a hat to Tim Burton's universe. Although the series ultimately found its own direction, Batman Returns was crucial in establishing its initial tone and aesthetic. Victor Zsasz almost made it into the show. Though Batman the Animated Series has never hesitated in addressing darker themes, its own writers and artists found one foe too unsettling for Saturday morning airwaves: Victor Zsasz. Bruce Timm had drawn up a character design for Zsasz, imagining how the psychopathic murderer might exist in the program's dark, stylized universe. However, writer and producer Paul Dini shot down the idea instantly, feeling that including Zsasz would be very risky. While other villains had theatrical motivations or tragic histories, Zsasz was strictly sadistic serial killer material, and that's it. Without any comedic bite or sympathetic angle, his sole identifying characteristic was a disturbing one. He cut a tally mark into his own body for each of his victims. That degree of psychological horror, particularly the physical self-mutilation element, was way too graphic to include in a program seen during children's programming hours. Dini's decision wasn't just about censorship, it was about maintaining a careful balance. The series often explored the psychological complexity of its villains, but Zsasz's brand of violence offered no nuance, only terror. As a result, he remained one of the few major Batman rogues never adapted into the series. Marvelous verdict! Batman the Animated Series wasn't merely another superhero cartoon, it remapped the possibilities of animated storytelling. We can't even say what aspect of the show deserves the most credit: the innovative imagery, the adults-only themes, the iconic voice work, or the absolutely unrivaled attention to detail. The show left a lasting footprint on pop culture, redefined the Dark Knight's legacy for a whole generation. Whether you've been a long-time viewer or are learning these facts for the first time, it's safe to say Batman the Animated Series is still a colossus of animation achievement and continues to cast a long, stylish noir shadow over Gotham City to this day. That's all we got for you this time, but if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with all your Batman buddies. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.